from the team you can trust. This is News 8 at 5.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Gross, and thank you for joining us right here on RochesterFirst.com for our ROC Rewind. We'll be looking back at some of 2019's most memorable stories in mostly chronological order. The year certainly started off with big news. Then WHEC Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Capel was fired after being accused of using a racial slur on air. Capel maintains that it was an honest mistake, saying he flubbed the words of Martin Luther King Jr., but the station fired him anyways. Capel has since filed lawsuits against his former employer, as well as Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren. Now, everyone says they know how to drive in winter, but when the snow really starts falling, our skills get put to the test. At the end of January of this year, more than 20 vehicles were involved in a pileup crash on I-90 near Batavia. Amazingly, and just look at this photo, it's incredible, there were no fatalities or major injuries, but a New York State trooper was hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. In one of the biggest local scandals of the year, Adam McFadden, the former Rochester City Councilman, was charged with wire fraud as a part of an investigation into a scheme where investigators say he improperly received funds from the Rochester Housing Authority. This is Christian Garzone's story from that day in February.
U.S. Attorney James Kennedy says City Councilman Adam McFadden, along with George Moses, committed wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit those actions between October 2014 and December of 2015. Together, according to the U.S. District Court, McFadden and Moses caused Rochester Housing Charities to enter into a contract with Capital Connection Partners, knowing that services would not be performed and knowing that most of the money would be diverted by wiring funds. The total amount transferred was around $87,000.
Obviously, it's a very sad day when we have to charge an elected official with committing a federal crime.
McFadden, who pled not guilty, says he's confident what happened will get worked out in court.
But right now, I'm not going to be hiding in my community. I'm not going to hold my head down. I have faith that my hard work speaks for itself, and I'll continue that.
McFadden's attorney says the public should not rush to judgment.
This is a time in our justice system that we have to rely on that fundamental tenet of the presumption of innocence.
In a statement from Council President Loretta Scott, she says she was saddened by the charges, but she believes in due process and that everyone is innocent until proven otherwise. But U.S. Attorney Kennedy issued words of caution for elected officials who think they might be above the law.
You are elected to serve, and if you fail to serve and decide to take, you will be charged.
Thank you, Mr. Garzone. Since then, George Moses has pleaded not guilty to a 55-count indictment. He's charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and more. We go to March now, and just when we thought the Leticia Estacio saga was over, she sat down with us and told us she was running for city council. She would not end up winning, and we have more from this saga a little bit later in the show. Moving on to a different kind of woman, less than a year after she died this past March, longtime Rochester Congresswoman Louise Slaughter was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Inductees are selected for their invaluable contributions to American society. She served for more than 30 years, over 16 congressional terms. Now, later in March, the New York State Legislature passed a bill that would ban single-use plastics. Governor Andrew Cuomo swiftly announced it was a bill that he intended to sign, and it caused quite the uproar. Some folks applauded the environmentally friendly legislation, while others bemoaned the inconvenience. The law is set to be implemented in March of 2020, while also allowing local governments the option to impose a 5-cent fee on paper bags. In early April, Mayor Lovely Warren announced that LaRon Singletary would become the new Rochester police chief. Singletary was chosen among 20 candidates who responded to a nationwide search. With 19 years of law enforcement experience, Singletary said one of the biggest challenges of the job was bridging the gap between the community and his department.
engagement is key. Coming together, having those difficult conversations, allowing the community to see where an officer is coming from, allowing the officer to see where the community is coming from. We really need to have these difficult conversations. I think there's a lot of animosity, tension in the air, and I hope to be the one that can kind of bring that together.
And during the speech, he also thanked his family for their unconditional support. On to some lighter, or should I say deep-fried news. Jackson, a 10-year-old patient at Golisano Children's Hospital, found a creative way to land himself some bacon. He put up a poster in his hospital window that simply said, "Send bacon." In response, community members who spotted the sign ended up sending him bacon, bacon jerky, and even bacon-themed Band-Aids. Now, just 2 years removed from Lake Ontario's highest water levels in recorded history, flooding was once again an issue along the shoreline. Here was the scene for May, and you can see the raging waters here. This is an indication of things to come for another long summer for shoreline homeowners and businesses. Stephanie Golden was at Edgemere Drive on May 28th.
It has been a busy day along Edgemere Drive and surrounding areas in Greece. Town workers and the Army Corps of Engineers have been working all day to help keep the rising waters at bay. Kristen Bellman says the water from the lake is not at a level she has seen before.
It's worse than I've ever seen it, and it's just really scary. You know, the mold and damage and everything.
To combat the flooding caused by the large waves from Lake Ontario, homeowners have been piling on more sandbags.
Well, what's happening now, it's coming up over the sandbag walls, knocking the sandbag walls down, flooding through the yards, flooding basements, and even the sandbags are not helping with this kind of wave action and the winds that's coming in.
Water levels would once again break records for Lake Ontario this past summer. That trend led to New York State filing a lawsuit against the International Joint Commission, the body that oversees water levels. Michael Sippel, a now former Rochester police officer, was sentenced to 3 years probation after being found guilty of assault in May. Sippel was also sentenced to 3 years of an order of protection to Christopher Pate, the of that assault. Sippel was also ordered to pay a $250 court assessment penalty. His probation is scheduled to last until September 16, 2022, but it can end earlier if he meets all conditions. His attorney said he will be appealing the decision. David Bellavia, a Western New York native, was awarded the Medal of Honor over the summer. Bellavia is an Iraq veteran who cleared out an insurgent strongpoint and allowed members of his platoon to move to safety. Onto a different kind of story. This one is about the end of an era. The carousel at the former Irondequoit Mall has found a new home. It was sold for more than $200,000. It was taken apart at the scene and then shipped off to its new owner in China. This, unfortunately, was perhaps the most tragic event in Rochester of 2019. In the middle of July, 3-year-old Bryce Rayner died after falling into a grease trap behind the Tim Hortons on University Avenue. Afterwards, we spoke with Bryce's mother about how she wants her son remembered.
He didn't see any bad in anybody. He loved everybody. It would be random people would be out just on a regular day, and he'd say hey to everybody, and it's like he would bring smiles to everybody's faces everywhere we went. He was a very good boy. He was a very good boy.
Bryce's death was not in vain. Local, state, and even federal lawmakers have all proposed legislation since Bryce's tragic passing to ensure that these kind of accidents never happen again. A small confession. I love this story. This is a $10 million home in the old quarry in Penfield. I got to take these photos and video twice this year. Now, that home and property was eventually donated to RIT, and the school will lightly develop the land into a field station. There, they will research fields including ecology, agriculture, and sustainability. And on to another special home in the Rochester area. News 8 took a tour of a Frank Lloyd Wright home in Rochester, the Boyden house, of course. Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous and world-renowned architect. We learned about the residence's history, art, and architecture, and how this private building, we should say, looks after its massive renovation. Thank you so much for watching so far, and we'll be right back.
From the team you can trust, this is News 8 at 5.
Alan Iglesia is a teenager from Webster with a severe feeding disorder, which means he can only eat about 3 foods. Kayla Green had the incredible story about how the community came together for Iglesia.
When I first tried potato bread, the taste, I don't know, it sounded satisfying than I expected. It just, tasted great.
Wegmans Country Potato Bread. Karen Iglesia says that's the only food her son Alan has eaten consistently for 12 years.
So he eats about 2 loaves of the bread per day. There is 12 slices in each, so he has 24 slices of bread every day.
Before you even touch it, you could tell the difference, right? Just by smelling it.
Mm-hmm.
Alan has a severe feeding disorder, meaning he has a heightened sense of smell and taste, which prevents him from eating anything hot or cold. He also can't try new foods and went through feeding therapy for 4 years. He reverted back to just eating this bread.
If I actually, touched it or tasted it, I would tell them.
It feels different from the other breads?
Yeah.
When Wegmans called Karen last week and told her they're going to stop carrying the bread, she reached out for help.
Let's put a post up online on Facebook. Went viral, I guess, because before we know it, we had over 400 loaves of bread. From Syracuse to Buffalo, from Virginia to Binghamton, from people were like, we got bread, we're gonna mail you bread.
Some of this bread coming from the Wegmans where the family shops.
The manager tells us people have been coming in the past few days asking, where's Alan's bread? And then buying up tons of it to give to him. They're calling themselves Alan's Army.
A lot of total strangers, just came up and says, we have a kid we have our own child with the challenges eating, and we understand, and they went way out of their way to do that, and to see that kind of support from your community is just very humbling.
Store manager Amy Paisley says Eastway Wegmans is putting aside and freezing 100 loaves for Alan. They're also working to help him find a new favorite bread.
Our team knew we needed to help him. We needed to find a way to buy them time so that Alan could find something else, another bread or something that could be a replacement for the potato bread.
These people doing a great job, Lo, and I just want to thank them for, collecting bread for me before it stops.
Thank you so much, Miss Green. That's really a wonderful story. Alan and the Iglesias eventually did meet with Wegmans, and they made a new bread that Alan can eat. These 2 fine young gentlemen behind me, Darius Dillard and Nate Williams, 2 young men from Rochester, were sitting on an Emerson Street porch this summer when they saw smoke streaming from the 2nd floor across the street. When their uncle called 911, they ran over without hesitation, kicked in the door, and helped rescue the family of 5. They would later be recognized by Rochester City Council for their efforts, and on a personal note, I got to spend a lot of time with those 2 fine young men, and it was really an amazing thing for me to see them up there. Now, our station was literally shaken when a house on a nearby street called Illinois Street exploded this past August. We were out on scene all night as first responders sifted through the debris. People who lived in the area said they heard a loud bang and felt their walls shake.
We jump up, I go outside, I see smoke over the northern horizon of Atlantic Avenue, and grab my keys, lock the door, and I come around the corner and walk down the street. There's already a ton of first responders.
I was laying down and I thought my little brother was jumping because my bed had shook, but when we went outside, our whole block was trying to find out what was going on.
Firefighters determined that the explosion was intentionally caused by a former homeowner who defaulted on his mortgage. That man died in the explosion, but his dog was safe. Moving on to something a little different. When it comes to the most bizarre stories for 2019 in Rochester, this one's tough to top. A security worker at the Greater Rochester International Airport was fired after she was caught on tape passing that note. It was a mean message to a traveler. It simply said, "You ugly." Few legislative ideas were met with as much public backlash as Governor Cuomo's 10-year license replacement program. Lawmakers called it a money grab and unnecessary. At the time, many of our own viewers said they didn't like any of the 5 design finalists. A winner did eventually emerge, and you can find that a little bit down the line on this web story. Canalside Mobile Home Park in Lyons in New York went more than a month without power this summer, enduring sweltering heat with no access to fans or air conditioning. The situation became so dire that New York State Attorney General and lawmakers were asked to investigate. Christian Garzone did an incredible amount of legwork on this story, and Kayla Green was there on the day that the power came back.
I can finally have a warm shower now.
That's just one of the things Brandy Mae Imson and other residents are looking forward to with the power back on. Both Imson and Melissa Lair say it happened just in time.
We're ecstatic. We're happy because school starts on Wednesday. I mean, we think they could have did it a little bit faster, but who can complain because we're home?
We were supposed to move next Wednesday, but their power's just gone on.
There are 11 units with people living in them, and the Lyons code enforcer says those all have power now. Town officials say they did inspections before deciding to shut off the power July 11th. They say there were naked dangling power lines, old equipment, and frequent power surges. Neighbors tell us the community came together during this tough time.
You had to take it day by day. There was no other way to do it. You just had to smile and tell the kids we'll be home soon. It breaks your heart a little bit more each time they ask when we can come home, though.
Some residents say they're ready to move on from this, quote, camping trip from hell and be back home.
Sleeping in my house. Being home. Our own space again. Cuddling my cat.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garzone, for your work, and thank you, Ms. Green, for bringing us this story. One of the best football players in the area and a nationally ranked prospect was denied the right to play this year. Seven Magee, a junior at East High School who has already committed to the University of Oregon, was listed as the #2 running back in his class for the entire country. And he wasn't allowed to suit up for the East High Eagles after transferring back to Rochester from a prep school in California. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Rochester filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in September. That filing came after a flurry of lawsuits against the organization, mostly sexual assault cases that were filed following the enactment of the Child Victims Act. Diocese officials said the bankruptcy will not affect local parishes and parishioners as they are legally independent of the diocese under the New York State Religious Corporation Law, according to Bishop Salvatore Matano. No parishes were named or associated with the bankruptcy filing. The Child Victims Act, which went into effect on August 14th, extended the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse cases for 1 year. The myriad of Rochester City School District issues finally came to a head this September, although initial reports indicated the Rochester City School District was facing a budget crisis of approximately $50 million. On September 26th, it was revealed that the RCSD Superintendent Terry Dade announced that the shortfall was actually closer to $30 million. Since then, protests erupted, including at the Board of Education building before the final vote, as you can see right here. But just under 100 positions across the RCSD will be cut. Now, something a bit more positive. After years of planning and development, city officials broke ground on the long-awaited skate park in downtown Rochester. The park will be over 14,000 square feet and is set for completion in the fall of 2020. Skaters in the Rochester area are rejoicing as it finally gives them an option for skating that's a little bit closer to home. Rochester police officer Denny Wright was released from the hospital 3 weeks after he was attacked during an altercation on Peck Street in Rochester. He was surrounded by fellow law enforcement, family, and friends. As you can see here, this is him exiting. This was a very amazing scene. I was there. There was so much energy. Now, Keith Williams, who was 28 of Rochester, was the one charged with attempted and aggravated murder and aggravated assault of a police officer in the incident. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be right back.
From the team you can trust, this is News 8 at 5.
One of the biggest stories of the year, Adam Bello defeating Cheryl D'Onofrio for Monroe County Executive by fewer than 6,000 votes. Bello is the county's second Democratic executive and the first since 1991. Here's Kayla Green's report from election night.
Democrats are still celebrating Adam Bello's historic win in the county executive race. Now, this race was one to watch all election season. Bello was facing Republican incumbent Cheryl D'Onofrio. A Democrat hasn't held the county executive seat since 1991, and Adam Bello is only the second Democrat to ever hold the seat. A huge upset in Monroe County, and the race was close all night, even being close to 50-50 at times. Bello ended up winning with 52% of the vote. Bello says that he believes it's time for change in Monroe County.
I'm delighted, obviously, by the results, and I'm really looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and getting to work here. We have a lot of challenges that face Monroe County, and I think the message the voters sent today is that they're looking for us to put our differences aside and politics aside and bring people together and work together to really start to move the needle and impact the community. That's what I'm looking forward to doing.
Bello says he's excited to get started with all the plans he and his team have for Monroe County, and he says this is a new beginning. In Rochester, Kayla Green, News 8.
Thank you so much, Miss Green. And another big story out of election night. A whopping 75% of voters approved a Rochester Police Accountability Board. It would set up civilian oversight of local police. This is a Tia Collins report from election night.
Since legislation for the Police Accountability Board was first introduced, it's faced both opposition and support from people throughout the community. Those against the board say it's too much oversight. It violates contracts between the union and the city. But those advocating for the board say it's a new way for the community to hold their law enforcement officials accountable. According to a website, the main goal of the board is to hold police more accountable. The Police Accountability Board would be independent of the city. The 9-member board would have the power to investigate complaints. They could subpoena evidence and witnesses. They would have disciplinary power and the power to review policy practices and recommend changes. Both the local police union and members of the executive PAB board spoke out after the legislation was approved.
It's not needed, and quite frankly, there was the biggest challenge and the biggest thing that we need in this city is transparency. And this legislation has not addressed that at all and will not address it, and that's part of the issues.
I am so happy. I am so proud of the citizens of Rochester that came out, they voted, they put their voices out there for what they wanted as far as for policing and community policing. So right now I am happy.
Going forward, the Police Accountability Board could still face some legal troubles, but the next step is to appoint members to sit on the board. In Rochester, Tia Collins, News 8.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. The next step is filling out the positions on the board. City Council accepted applications and right now are reviewing those that they received. The Rochester Police Department and the family of Officer Manny Ortiz extended an invite to the entire community to attend a memorial service in Rochester in early November. Ortiz, a 22-year veteran of the department, died the week prior in a car crash. The Monroe County Sheriff and Rochester Police Chief described it as a tragic accident. New York Post writer Maureen Callahan called Rochester grim and depressing, the Noive. That line was in a column in which she blasted Brooklynites for going crazy over the new Wegmans there, which to us in Rochester is no surprise. Now, in response, the Rochester Red Wings announced they will host Maureen Callahan Night in the summer. After I talked to her, she said that she'll be in attendance. Charlie Tan, a Pittsford Mendon High School graduate, confessed to shooting and killing his father, Jim Tan, 5 years later. His confession via affidavit revealed new details about the days leading up to the shooting in an effort to get his sentence reduced. An intense, complex international geopolitical conflict reached our city. And the public protests in Hong Kong had the University of Rochester under pressure. The university moved a few flags as a part of their international display, a move that would boil tensions across campus. It spurred back and forth gatherings to paint over messages on walls in the campus tunnel system. Like I said, she's back. Former City Court Judge Leticia Asasio was sentenced to 6 months in prison for violating her probation in late November. The ongoing legal saga that had captured the attention of Rochester for more than 3.5 years finally met its conclusion. Astasio's probation stemmed from a 2016 DWI conviction. Here's a listen from the courtroom.
The judicial system does not function to break people, and it is destroying me, irrespective of what I look like when I come into court, whether I'm smiling and happy, and this is difficult every day.
It stopped today, and it stops now. I'm revoking your probation, and I'm resentencing you to 180 days in jail, starting now.
Since her initial arrest, she was in and out of courts, and of course the headlines as well, and spent nearly 4 months in jail. She was put on trial for a separate weapons charge, was formally removed from the bench, and had the unsuccessful run for city council. In one of her last moves before leaving office, Monroe County Executive Cheryl D'Onofrio signed a controversial bill into law that would make harassing or annoying a police officer and first responders illegal. Protesters argue that the bill's language is vague and unconstitutional. She says that harassment can be anything from annoying a first responder to assaulting one. Punishments include jail time and up to a $5,000 fine. Law enforcement agencies throughout the region have stated that they will not arrest anyone at this time for violating the law, and the matter is likely headed to the courts in the near future. Moving on to some of our quote-unquote viral content that did well for us on our social media. A sweltering day in Bills camp saw Josh Allen, and he saw Mason SRAM of Brockport wearing a Dolphins jersey and said, "Oh no, that can't happen." The Bills QB gave Mason one of his own jerseys and the hat that he was wearing, signed them both, and then he took care of the Miami apparel. And this video from my guy, Ned Powers from Powers Farm Market, carving a pumpkin. Powers filled their legendary teepees every year with pumpkins picked from their farms. And since the pumpkins rot out about every week, they have to carve thousands of the gourds to keep the teepees looking nice and spooky. Whew, I don't know about you guys, that was quite a year for all of us. Thank you all so much for your time and company. I am Dan Gross, and have a lovely 2020.